Shara sat on the cool ground, still dizzy from the magic that had whisked her away from the palace and that horrible wizard. Even without the after-effects of the magic, her mind would have been reeling. In the last few minutes she'd learned a great deal that she wished she could forget. The most disturbing item being that her father had promised her to that hideous man. Still, whatever her father had done 20 years ago, she knew he must have had his reasons. He was a good person, and she loved him no matter what mistakes he may have made in the past. Now she had to get home, and sitting here wasn't going to accomplish anything. Shara got to her feet and noted with pleasure that her knees weren't shaking. She glanced at the sky, hoping to get an idea of how much time had passed. The sun wore thick clouds like a veil, so she couldn't tell. She looked around, trying to get her bearings. Strange, tall trees with deep grooves in their nearly black bark surrounded the little clearing where she'd appeared. The trees didn't even have leaves. Instead, they had long green needles. What had her tutor said about trees like these? Struggle as she might to remember, her mind refused to yield the information she sought. All she remembered was that needle-bearing trees didn't grow in the High Kingdom. That little nugget of information almost caused her to collapse again. The ring had taken her farther from home than she'd first thought. Well, she'd just have that much farther to go to get back. The strange trees grew as far as she could see in every direction. The ground was rough and littered with needles that had turned orange. That didn't bode well for finding civilization. She smiled a little. One good thing about being lost was that it didn't matter if you went the wrong way because you couldn't get any more lost. Without better options, Shara picked a direction and started walking. She hadn't gone far when thunder rumbled in the distance. If she didn't find shelter soon, she was going to get drenched. A light drizzle had started to fall when she smelled smoke. She hadn't seen any lightning, which meant a forest fire was unlikely. That meant someone had built a fire. Maybe a woodsman lived around here with a nice warm cabin like in the stories her nanny used to tell her. Elated at the thought of finding another person, any other person in this wilderness, Shara hurried as fast as she could manage toward the smoke. A short time later she found the source. Someone had built a small lean-to out of limbs and brush. Beside a boulder a few feet away, they'd started a large fire. She stepped into the clearing, all her senses alert for danger. What she'd do if danger actually showed up was another matter. No guards would come running if she screamed. "Hello? Is anyone here?" she called out in the trade language used by merchants and travelers rather than in her native tongue. If anyone was here, they'd be most likely to speak that. She felt something sharp stick in her spine. "Yeah, I'm here," a deep masculine voice said. This wasn't right at all. Her rescuer wasn't supposed to stick a knife in her back. She started to turn around and offer a lecture on how to properly treat a princess, but the knife pressed harder against her and she changed her mind. "I don't like people sneaking up on me," the man said. "I wasn't sneaking up on you. I smelled the smoke and thought I could find shelter with whoever built the fire." "You don't look too dangerous. All right, go sit by the fire. I'm not going to kill you right now." Great. That was very reassuring. When he'd taken the knife away, she walked slowly over to the fire. The side of the lean-to looked about 6 feet long, and a single branch held up each end. There appeared to just be enough room to keep 2 people out of the rain. She sat down under the lean-to by the fire and held out her hands. The heat felt wonderful. The strange man sat down beside her. He still held his weapon, a double-edged short sword, she noted, not a knife. Trying not to be too obvious about it, she took a look at her captor. He had dark eyes and a small, crooked nose. A few days' worth of stubble darkened his jaw. He wore his long black hair in a ponytail. The overall effect wasn't unappealing. His clothes left something to be desired. They didn't look like anyone had washed them in a year, and a few holes revealed pale skin underneath. At least he didn't stink too bad. Without warning, he sheathed his sword and said, "I'm sorry about the hole in your dress. There are bandits in these woods, and it pays to be cautious. I was just talking before. I didn't really plan to kill you." She sighed in relief. Maybe he'd turn out to be her savior after all.